I still remember the humid air that clung to my skin that day, as if the universe was trying to drown out the sick feeling crawling up my spine. We'd just gotten married on a beach in some tropical paradise, palm trees swaying, waves crashing softly behind us, a postcard-perfect scene that I'd always thought symbolized new beginnings. But lying underneath that idyllic surface was something rotten, something I didn't see coming until it smacked me in the face. We arrived early, both of us buzzing with excitement, surrounded by friends and family. I was elated imagining the life we'd build together. She looked stunning, glowing in her white dress, her smile brighter than the sun. I was sure I'd made the right choice. Then, as I was packing my bag in the hotel room, I noticed her phone lying on the bedside table. Nothing unusual except the screen was lit up in a weird way, and I saw a message thread that made my stomach sink. It was from him, her best friend. The one she'd known since college, the one I'd always trusted. The message was intimate, flirtatious even, and it stretched back over days. I remember the words clearly. "Can't wait to see you later. Thinking about last night," and a little wink emoji that felt like a punch in the gut. I froze, heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone in the world could hear it. My fingers trembled as I snatched the phone, staring at her name in the corner, the message still visible. I gently scrolled through the conversation, watching the flirtatious tone, the secret emojis, and suddenly all the pieces clicked into place. How long had they been lying to my face? Was this going on during our entire engagement? Were they sneaking around behind my back while I was planning the wedding? Every nerve in my body buzzed with a mixture of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak. I wanted to smash that phone, to scream at her, but I stayed frozen instead, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. When she finally found me in the room, I was clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. "Hey, what are you doing?" she asked, voice sweet, innocent. I looked her straight in the eyes, hot tears threatening to spill. "Who is this?" I asked, voice trembling. "Who have you been talking to? Because I just saw this." I held out the phone, my finger trembling as I pointed to the screen. "Your messages to him. How long has this been going on? During our honeymoon." Her face went pale, the kind of white that looks like she'd seen a ghost. She reached out as if to grab her phone back, but I pulled it away sharply. "Don't lie to me," I said through clenched teeth. "I want the truth now. How long?" She stammered, trying to come up with some excuse, some bullshit about just talking. "It's not what it looks like," or some pathetic denial, but I'd already seen enough. The adrenaline kept me upright, but inside I was crumbling. The whole trip, the entire wedding, everything I'd believed in was a lie. The worst part, I had no idea how long they'd been doing this, how many nights she'd been sneaking messages, how many moments I'd been completely blind. The phone slipped from my hand and I just stared at her. Her eyes flicked down, then darted away. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the tense silence thick enough to choke. "You lied to me," I finally managed, voice rough. "During the happiest day of my life you were cheating on me with my best friend. Do you even realize how much you've betrayed me?" She started crying then, tears streaming down her face, voice pleading. "It was a mistake, I swear. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Please, I love you, love." I cut her off sharply, feeling a flicker of something dark flicker inside me. That's funny, because I don't remember seeing love in those messages. Just a lot of lies. That's when I started formulating my plan, because I knew I could never trust her again. And I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without paying a price. I didn't want her to just say sorry and go back to her life as if nothing had happened. No, I needed to make her feel what betrayal really meant. I wanted her to see that I wasn't some fool who'd turn the other cheek after finding something this rotten. I told her I needed some time to think, which was a lie. I needed to get my head straight, figure out how deep the rabbit hole went, and come up with a way to make her regret this. Because if I let this slide now, I'd be a goddamn fool. The seeds of revenge had already taken root, and I knew I wouldn't rest until I saw her take responsibility for it. But for now, I left her crying in the hotel room, her mascara smudged, the room smelling of salt and shame. I stepped outside into the sunlight, the warm breeze hitting my face like a slap. My mind was racing. This wasn't over. Not even close. I'd find a way to turn this nightmare into my weapon, and she'd wish she'd never crossed me. Next part. I spent the rest of that day walking aimlessly along the shoreline, feeling the rough sand grind beneath my shoes and the salty air sting my nostrils. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, red and tear-streaked, pleading with me to forgive her. But my stomach was a knot of rage and confusion. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. How many signs had I missed? The late nights she claimed to work late, the secretive texts she'd hide whenever I entered the room. Was it all just a cover? I knew I had to confront this head-on, but I also knew I couldn't just run to her and demand answers. That would be too easy, too predictable. No, I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would make her feel the full weight of what she'd done. I went back to the hotel room that evening, my mind already racing, my fists clenched in anger. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw her sitting on the bed, nervously clutching a tissue, eyes red but trying to act innocent. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, voice trembling. I didn't bother answering directly. Instead, I just stared at her. "I want to know everything," I said coldly. "How long have you two been doing this? How many times?" She hesitated, looking like she wanted to bolt. "It was just a few times," she whispered. "It meant nothing, I swear." "Nothing doesn't cut it," I said, voice rising. "You crossed a line I never thought you would. During our honeymoon, our perfect honeymoon, you were sneaking around texting him. How many times? Tell me the truth." Her lips quivered. "Maybe a few times. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at her, feeling my jaw tighten. I knew I'd have to make her suffer, but I also knew I couldn't do that with just words. I needed to be smarter. I needed to set a trap. That night I meticulously gathered evidence, screenshots of her messages, notes, even a few copies of her emails. I wanted everything in my hands so I could make her see how deeply she'd lied. The next morning I woke up with a plan. I decided I'd play it cool for now, act as if I was still in shock, but secretly I'd start turning the screws. I knew her phone was the key. So I installed a monitoring app, discreet, undetectable, and started tracking her messages. I wanted to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. I also reached out to her best friend, the one she'd been texting, and set up a little coincidental meeting. I told him I needed to talk about her. The days that followed were a blur of careful manipulation. I kept my cool in front of her, but behind the scenes, I was gathering dirt. I'd see her sneaking her phone into her purse, always hiding it like she knew she was guilty. I could feel my pulse pounding every time I saw her clutching it. Her eyes darted nervously whenever I came close. She was starting to realize I was onto her. Good. One night, I staged a small accident, a fake power outage that I knew would cut her off from her phone. As she fumbled around in the dark, I found her trying to hide something in her purse. I casually moved closer, acting concerned. "Hey, let me help," I said. When I reached in, my fingers brushed against a small, folded-up paper. When I opened it, I found printouts of some of her texts, proof of the affair, plain as day. Her face paled as she saw me holding her secrets. "You've been lying to me from the start," I said quietly, voice like steel. "I've got everything I need now, and I'm just getting started." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I felt a strange mixture of disgust and satisfaction, like I'd finally uncovered her true face. That night, I decided I'd take the next step. The plan was simple. I'd confront her with the evidence, but I'd do it on my terms. I wanted her to feel the fear, the shame, and the realization that she'd lost everything she thought she had. So I sat her down in the living room, the evidence laid out before her like a trail of breadcrumbs. Her face was a mask of horror as I explained everything I'd discovered. "You thought you could hide this forever," I said, voice steady. "But I don't just want an apology. I want you to understand what you've done. And I want you to know that I'm not going to let this slide." She broke down completely, begging, crying, trying to explain. But I knew what needed to come next. I'd already decided I wouldn't be the fool who forgave her easily. I was done with her lies, her betrayal. I'd make her see that I was serious, that I was willing to take everything away if she didn't face her mistakes. I told her to pack her things. She wasn't staying that night. I went to my safe deposit box, retrieved a little something I'd prepared earlier, an email I'd drafted, a trail of proof and a plan for what was coming next. I handed her a single key, the one to the apartment we shared, and told her to leave. "You want to play the victim?" I said, voice cold. Then I'll give you what you want, but don't come back, not ever. As she gathered her things, I watched her face crumple, and I felt the first flicker of something darker inside me, the satisfaction of finally taking control. I'd spent years building this life, trusting her, believing in us. Now I saw it all for what it was, a house of cards ready to collapse, and I was finally the one holding the wrecking ball. Next part. The silence in the apartment was deafening as she packed her belongings. The only sounds were the rustling of her clothes and the occasional sniffle, but inside I felt nothing but cold resolve. I watched her, every movement slow and trembling, her face etched with regret and fear. It was almost satisfying, watching her realize how deeply she'd screwed up, how badly she'd betrayed the trust I'd given her. I kept my tone even, almost detached. Leave the keys on the table when you're done. I don't want anything from you anymore. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and nodded, not saying a word. I didn't bother trying to comfort her. She'd already lost that privilege. She was just an obstacle I was finally removing. As she headed towards the door, I took a deep breath to steady my nerves. The moment I'd been planning for was finally. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope, something I'd prepared earlier, containing everything I'd uncovered, including the chat screenshots, her secret letters, and a detailed account of the lies. I placed it on the table as she left. "Don't come back," I said quietly. "And don't bother trying to contact me. You made your choice. Now live with it." The door clicked shut behind her and I exhaled, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Part of me wanted to break down and cry. This betrayal hurt more than I'd expected. But I pushed through. I had to stay strong. This was only the beginning. I spent the next few hours cleaning up the apartment. I tossed her clothes into a trash bag, packed up her jewelry, her phone, all the physical remnants of her affair. I wanted to erase her from my space entirely, to cut the cord completely. Each item I removed felt like a small victory, a symbol that I had reclaimed some part of myself. Later that night, I sat on the sofa, staring at the unopened envelope. I knew I needed to take some tangible action to make her regret what she'd done. I had the evidence, the keys, and now a plan. But I also knew I couldn't keep everything bottled up. I had to act. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email. It was going to be the story of us, what she'd done, the evidence I'd found, and what was coming next. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be some sap who forgave betrayal with a smile. She'd see that I was serious. As I typed, I could feel my heart pounding again, this time with purpose. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I wanted her to understand that I was done, that she'd lost everything, her place in my life, our shared future, her trust. The email was ready. I attached the evidence, the messages, the proof of her lies. Then I took a deep breath, hesitated, and hit send. The notification appeared. "Your message has been sent." I leaned back, feeling a strange sense of calm washing over me, mixed with anticipation. What surprised me most was how clear everything suddenly was. I'd spent so long trusting her, giving her the benefit of the doubt. But now I realized that trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered by lies and betrayal. I've been a fool to think I could fix this with apologies or explanations. Next, I bought a one-way ticket to a place far away, somewhere she'd never think to look for me. I needed distance, time, space to breathe and to think about what I was really going to do next. I knew she'd try to contact me, maybe plead or beg, but I had already made up my mind. I sat in my empty apartment, the cool night air drifting in through the window. I felt lighter somehow, but also more prepared. The betrayal had cut deep, yes, but I'd turned that pain into something stronger, something that would remind her exactly what she lost. And I knew that from now on I'd never be so naive again. Trust, once broken, is hard to mend, but revenge is a different game altogether. Next part. The flight was long, quiet, and filled with my thoughts. I kept replaying the moment I handed her the keys and watched her walk out of my life. It was strange how quickly everything had unraveled. The pain had turned into a cold resolve, and I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with anger. I was finally free from the web she'd spun around me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Once I arrived at my destination, I rented a small apartment in a quiet part of town. I needed distance, a clean break. The first thing I did was log into my email again. I'd kept her number, her email, everything. I wanted to see if she'd try to contact me right away or if she'd try to spin some story to save herself. But I knew better. She'd be desperate and I was prepared. Over the next few days, I laid the groundwork for my revenge. I reached out to her closest friends, the ones who'd always been loyal. I wanted to plant doubts and watch her fall. I told them I'd discovered everything and that she'd been unfaithful, trying to get them to see her true face. Some were hesitant, but others responded with shock and outrage. Good. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on her social media. Sure enough, within a day, she started posting vague, cryptic messages sometimes. Honesty is the hardest thing to face. What's done in the dark always comes to light, stuff like that. I smiled to myself. It was exactly what I wanted. She was panicking, trying to cover her tracks, trying to spin a story that I was the villain. But I had the evidence and I knew she'd keep digging her own grave. One evening, I received a message from her. It was a simple email. Please, can we talk? I want to explain. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed a reply. I don't want to hear your excuses. I've seen enough. Leave me alone. That was all I needed to say. She'd understand that I was serious, but I wasn't finished. I had one more step, a move I'd been planning for days. I contacted a private investigator I knew. I paid him to dig into her background, find any other secrets she might be hiding. I wanted her to realize she'd crossed a line I could never forgive. When I got the report, I was stunned at what I saw. Evidence of more affairs, financial secrets, even a few hidden bank accounts. She'd been lying more than I even suspected. That night, I sat in my new apartment, the report spread out on the table. I could feel my jaw tighten as I looked at the pictures and documents. She'd been dishonest about everything. I felt a rush of anger, but also a strange clarity. I was done being the fool. The next morning, I drafted one last email, this time explicitly detailing everything I'd uncovered, warning her what I'd do if she ever tried to contact me again. I attached the evidence, making sure she'd see it all. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of finality. That chapter was closed. The betrayal was out in the open now, and she had no way to spin her way out of it. I realized I was finally free from the trap she'd set. No more hiding, no more pretending. I'd taken back control. My heart still ached, but I knew I'd come out stronger. That betrayal had broken me at first, but now it was my weapon. I'd use it to stay distant and to move forward. The truth was out there now, laid bare. And she'd never forget the day she threw everything away for a moment of weakness. That betrayal would haunt her just as it would remind me to be cautious next time. Trust, I learned, is a fragile thing. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. But revenge is about making someone feel just how badly they've screwed up. And that's exactly what I plan to do next. Next part. The days that followed felt like a strange limbo. I kept busy, but my mind constantly drifted back to her, to everything she'd done, and to the plans I'd made. I was finally free of her physical presence, but I still felt the sting of betrayal gnawing at me. Still, I knew that I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. If I wanted true justice, I had to execute the next phase of my plan carefully. One night I sat in my new apartment, the evidence I'd gathered spread across my laptop screen. It was time. I'd been methodical so far, but now I needed to step into the final act. I had her address, her work details, even a few sensitive secrets I'd uncovered. I wasn't planning to hurt her physically. No, that wouldn't serve my purpose. I wanted her to see her actions for what they truly were, to understand that she'd burned her bridges with me in a way that couldn't be ignored. I composed a carefully worded letter, not angry, not vengeful, just cold, precise, and undeniable. I explained everything, how I found her messages, the lies, the betrayal. I detailed the evidence from the investigation, the bank accounts she'd hidden, the other affairs she'd been keeping secret. I made sure she knew I had the means to ruin her completely if I wanted to. I ended the letter with a simple warning. If she ever tried to contact me again or deny her guilt, I'd make sure everyone knew the truth in full detail. Once I hit Send, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was like I'd finally drawn a line in the sand. She had been warned, and now it was her choice what to do next. I knew she'd try to spin this, deny everything, or maybe even try to manipulate others. But I also knew that I'd made her realize she'd gone too far. She was no longer in control of this game. The next morning, I took a small bag of her belongings I'd kept aside and walked to the local laundromat. I found a discreet corner, dropped her things into a washing machine, and watched as her jewelry, clothes, and other items spun around, getting thoroughly cleaned, symbolically removing her from my life, getting rid of the remnants of her betrayal. While the washer did its job, I picked up some papers I'd printed, screenshots, copies of her secret messages, the investigation report, and carefully placed them in an envelope. I addressed it to her workplace, a place where she was well known and where I knew her would see it. I wanted her to understand that she couldn't hide from her actions forever, that karma, in some form or another, always catches up. Once the laundry was done, I dried her things, folded them neatly, and put the envelope inside. I walked out of the laundromat feeling lighter yet more resolute than ever. I knew that her worst nightmare was just beginning. Every time she looked in the mirror or checked her email, she'd be reminded of what she'd lost: trust, my respect, her reputation. That day, I also ordered some custom business cards with a simple message: trust is earned and betrayal is remembered. I kept a few for myself, just as a reminder to stay cautious, to never let myself be so vulnerable again. I knew she'd try to spin her side of things, but I also knew I had done everything I could to ensure the truth was out. I realized that revenge isn't about random acts of cruelty. It's about control, about making sure that someone who wronged you understands the gravity of their actions. I'd taken back my power piece by piece, and I'd made her see what she'd lost. I wasn't just ending things, I was sending a message: betrayal has consequences. That night I sat in my new apartment, reflecting on everything. I felt exhausted but strangely at peace. She'd betrayed me, yes, but I'd survived, I'd outsmarted her, and most importantly, I'd learned that trust isn't given lightly. Next time I'd be more careful, but for now I was free. Next part. A week passed and I felt the weight of everything lift just a little more. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a cold clarity. All the evidence I'd gathered was out there now, public, undeniable. Her reputation with her friends, her job, all tainted by her own actions. I'd made sure of that. I knew she'd try to repair her image, spin some story to save face, but deep down I understood her game. Her lies had caught up with her, and there was no escaping that truth. I moved on to a simple but decisive step. I handed over the keys to the place we'd shared. I didn't want her to have any hold over me anymore. I walked to her old apartment, the one I'd been in only days before, and dropped the keys in the mailbox. As I watched the small metal flap close, I felt a strange rush of finality. That chapter was closed. Forever. Then I went to the courthouse, filled out the paperwork, and filed the divorce papers. I wanted no part of her, no strings attached. I'd take back my life piece by piece and rebuild it from the ground up. I told myself this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace of mind. Sitting outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath and looked around. The world kept turning, people rushing past, life going on as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew I'd been through an ordeal that would leave scars, but also lessons. I'd learned that trust is fragile, that betrayal cuts deep, and that sometimes the only way forward is to cut the cord and walk away. That night I sat alone in my new apartment, the city lights flickering outside the window. I poured myself a drink, not because I was celebrating, but because I was finally free. Free from her lies, her betrayal, and the illusion I'd held onto for so long. I'd been betrayed, yes. But I'd also survived, and I'd come out stronger. Looking back, I realize how much this ordeal changed me. It made me more cautious, more aware of the warning signs I'd ignored for too long. But it also taught me something invaluable. Revenge isn't about hurting someone else as much as it's about taking back control, about making someone see that they can't get away with everything. So if there's anything I want to leave you with, it's this: trust is a precious gift. Guard it fiercely. And if someone betrays you, find a way to reclaim your power. not with violence or spite, but with clarity and resolve. Because in the end, the only person who truly loses when trust is broken is the one who betrays it. As I turn off the lights that night, I feel a calmness I hadn't known in years. Her betrayal hurt, but I'm still standing, stronger, wiser, ready for whatever comes next. And that, I guess, is the real lesson.